said, Lisa, you just pay minimum on everything. He said, until the house gets sold, then we'll just worry about it.
My name is William Anthony McDonald Jr., United States Marine Corps, 1965 to 1969. And I've known Joe for too many years to remember. Well, he got me to join the United States Veterans Vietnam Era Post 2, like I said, many years ago. He taught me what it is to be a veteran and how to appreciate other veterans and not to listen too much to the news on other stuff that the veterans are supposedly doing. He impacted my life. He made me, I think, personally a better person because I've been with him a lot of different places like Bermuda and Nashville, Tennessee, so I've seen both sides of Joe. And fun time is over. He took care of his veterans, and that was his job, and he said that's his main job. That's why he stayed there for 18 years.
My name is John Francis Vaughn. What branch? United States Army Infantry. Years served 28. Rank First Sergeant. How did you know Joe? I served with Joe Colantoni. Joe Colantoni was in the 94th Regiment combat. I was in the 187th. Joe was in charge of all the support and everything with the kitchens. And I got to know him well. And also, knowing him well, I was still in the service when he recruited me in the USV and also the top 3. So we're good friends and go back maybe 55, 60 years. How did we meet? United States Army. First time I met Joe was up at Fort Devens. It's got to be in the early 70s. And we were friends ever since. One of the things that Joe did for me where I was first sergeant, I'd back in the deuce and a half, and he'd have the food ready for my 250 soldiers at the time at combat support. And I'll always throw a little, John, I threw a little extra in there for the boys. He was very generous. Joe was my friend. And the other impact, as far as his life is, he was the veterans agent for 14 years here in the town of Abington. You couldn't ask for a better veterans agent. He'd call me for things that if he needed me or he didn't know something like the combat support thing, which I now have. When that first came out, there was 5 different pieces of paper important. Your DD-214, your how many years you were in the service. So I went over that, and he was called the CRSC, combat related. So Joe and I always were good friends. He got me in every organization that he was in, and also when we were in the top 3, we all wear our dress blues, all 5 services. And if a soldier or a Marine or even the Navy didn't have their ribbons on, he'd call me first sergeant. You could come down and straighten them out. And what I used to come down, whatever service, I'd have a list of all the medals and all the ribbons, and I'd straighten them out. I didn't care if it was Navy or not. That made him happy. And the reason I got in this post here, I was still on active duty, and Joe paid my dues to the first USV back in the early 90s, and he also paid my first dues, even though I was on active duty, because I didn't get out until September 4th, 1994, and he paid my top 3 dues, and he told me, you better show up. I said, Joe, I can't show up. I'm still on active duty. He says, you better be here. I paid your dues. So me and him go back, way back. And just to end this interview, I just want to tell you, there wasn't a more caring person for veterans. He would help you no matter if you were from the town of Abington or anywhere. He would He would help. Guys used to come that didn't even live in this town, and he used to take care of them and put their claims in, and they would receive what they deserved as veterans. He helped me down the road. I'm 60% because of a drop out of a helicopter 30 feet. I'm lucky to be alive. So when I was putting in for my disability, Joe was right there. Anything you need, John, anytime, night or day, I'll take care of you. And that's what, it doesn't matter what branch you're in, and it didn't matter to him either, because he was the president of the top 3 also, which was all 5 branches. And he took care of all of us. So, and he's dearly missed by me, because he used to call me every other day. My wife says, Joe's on the phone.
My name is John James Beadle Jr., and I served in the U.S. Army back in 1968 to 72. I was in Vietnam. So I first met Joe back the early 90s when he bought the house across the street from my mother's. And we became neighbors at that time, but then I moved away for a while. I then got back with Joe through the USVVE Post 2, Staff Sergeant Richard A. Fitz. And as of today, I've been the elected commander for the past few years. I like Joe because Joe cared for veterans and wanted everything to be good for veterans. I also like Joe because he still lived across the street from my mother and would look in on her from time to time. I did quite a few functions with Joe after getting in with USV, and of course eventually with the top 3 association. One thing that I did like about Joe, it really wasn't what he did for me, but I was having an issue for my father-in-law, who was a World War II vet, who had never gotten his medals, and I wasn't sure how to go about doing that. So I drove over and saw Joe in his office and told him the problem. And he filled out a form for me and had me sign it as, the executor for that particular piece. He says, come back and see me next week. I did. He got word, they accepted it. He actually ended up getting a copy of his DD-214, and he gave me that. He says, you should see him within a week or 2. The box arrived at the house probably 6 days after he submitted the application. But he was always there for the vets, and he was a good friend, and I appreciate everything he did. He was one of the founders of the USV Staff Sergeant Richard A. Fitz chapter, along with Becky Coit. But this is about Joe. And I remember one time, this was quite a few years before that, USV had a cookout at Joe's house across the street from my mother's. They were there till after 4 o'clock in the morning. You think that street was quiet? About 7 o'clock it was dead silence, but before that, they had a great time though. But I'll always remember Joe because he thought of veterans first over everything. But he did have a kind heart.
Okay, my name is James Calvani, and I was in 2 branches. I was in the U.S. Navy and the U.S. Army. I did Cuba, Nam, and Desert Storm. I started in 1960, and I retired in 1990. Joe, I met being the past commander of the Abington VFW, and he was just a super guy and a super friend. And we chummed around, we went on vacation together, and him and Grace were very, very nice people, and we all miss him. And this is my wife, Linda. Say hello.
Hello, my name is Madge McDonald, and I'm Bill McDonald's wife. And I met Joe through my husband. As a matter of fact, he was best man at our wedding. We went on many trips together to Bermuda and Nashville, Tennessee. We always had a good time. But it wasn't just about good times. As a nurse, whenever I had a veteran and a nurse in my nursing facility that seemed to have not very much company, I could always call Joe, and Joe would always be there. He was just a superman, not only as a veterans agent, in which he was very good, but just as an all-around nice man. And he's very much missed.
We run the Joseph Colantoni Memorial Scholarship Fund, and we'd like to make a presentation of $500 to help in his efforts to get his Eagle Scouts
And the bench done.
and the bench done.
Thank you very much. It's very, very kind of you.